Hello, everybody. I'm a practicing therapist and a doctoral student of psychology. Today, we are going to go over if being with an avoidant or, loving an avoidant or understanding an avoidant will trick you into accepting the bare minimum. And if this is on purpose, if it's intentional, and what this topic basically means. So, the answer is not necessarily, it's mainly just different perspectives. So, what one person perceives as the bare minimum is what another person may perceive as effort and connection and leading towards commitment. Okay. So, folks, for some of y'all, this topic will be triggering. So, I would suggest that if you're already feeling triggered or there's something that you feel will probably affect you, your mental health, or your day to day, or at least today, I would say click off, right? Of course, you can watch, but this is probably going to be triggering for some of y'all, okay? I have other videos that might be less triggering, but just letting you know, okay? So we're going to go over the points that create the perspective of accepting the bare minimum versus what's really going on from an avoidance perspective and where you should come from. Like what is best for your options, perspective, and your relationship with your avoidant partner. Okay. So the very common one is actually the misconception part, right? The common misconceptions between y'all. Avoidants tend to perceive any effort as an act of connection and love because they don't give effort to people. They usually put on a mask, or they're usually very fake with people, or they're just very withdrawn and detached. A lot of y'all see that, right? An avoidant individual will act very animated and very fake around people they don't care about. But with you, they show their real self. So the small effort that they give you is very genuine from their heart. And it might look very small because that's all they have right now. They need to trust, they need to build, and sometimes they just need to build some social skills, which is not a bad thing. But a lot of avoidant individuals, they didn't pick up certain social skills and certain social cues because the neglect when they were growing up was more focused on perfectionism and climbing the ladder and showing up in a strong and sturdy way, exterior wise, right? No emotion, being able to handle certain things. And maybe they faced a lot of things that they just had to shut down for, especially if it's fearful. They probably had a lot of trauma some of it's unprocessed and they just don't know how to face some of those feelings right away. And so any connection, any act is very emotionally drawn for them, very connected from their perspective, right? Whereas anxious or even secure often perceive this as the bare minimum. Why should I be so happy accepting these breadcrumbs that he or she only sees me once a week without you guys realizing an avoidant individual hasn't talked to like really anyone genuinely and connected, especially romantically, for like 10 years. And so once a week is a lot, right? And I'm not trying to say your perspective as an anxious or even a secure is not valuable. It is. But what I'm saying is if you're seeing this as the bare minimum and you truly need more, it's possible an avoidant partner is really not for you because their world and their perspective and their view of among relationships is just so different. A lot of avoidant individuals and a lot of folks in the comments, y'all are avoidant. You've been alone for a long time by choice. You don't really let people in. So once a week, or twice a week, or whatever your system is, it's it's a lot, right? Just it's you need that time to be alone. A lot of avoidant individuals need time to decompress, and sometimes it's a lot of vulnerability being with a person you care about and being with a person that you love or potentially will fall in love with. And so you need time, avoidants need time to pace and process that. It's very overwhelming. And I'm being honest, truly, the pacing is built in, avoidants build it in subconsciously because they know somewhere if it's too much too soon, they may shut down and they may run away, especially if it's a fearful avoidance. And so it's very important to recognize they are not doing this to hurt you. They're doing this to love you. However, if it's too less for you or you feel like they're literally not making any change or any connection, that's different, right? That's different. So having a conversation, figuring out what you need, what your partner can give is very important. Meeting in the middle, okay? So the next one is the difference of perception. I would say of qualities of a respectful or respectable partner or a valid, valuable partner, okay? So avoidant individuals often see a partner who is willing to make small accommodations and slow adjustments over time as concrete and genuine because they perceive this as silent sacrifices, which is what they do, as comparison to anxious folks who may see that as a bare minimum. They don't see it as a bare minimum at all. They really like that genuine small connection. Anxious folks tend to do this even with strangers, right? I see this. Anxious individuals compromise with actual strangers. Oh, you want to take my seat? Or, like, let me do that for you, or let me carry the boxes for you. They don't see that as a sacrifice, do they, though? They see it as a given, right? Like, they think they should do this. And I'm from the South, so most people do that anyways, even avoidant folks. But what I mean is going over the top, right? Over the top, holding the door for literally the entire line. You're the first one there, and you're just like letting them all go, right? Sometimes anxious folks, they'll do that because they're trying to help people. Avoidant individuals, they will open the door, but after like a couple people, they're going to go inside, take their seat or whatever it was, right? And so it's very important to recognize that anxious and secure, but especially anxious, you guys are used to making those micro and small sacrifices for everybody. Avoidant individuals, they don't do it with anybody. So doing it with you is much more significant, but you don't see it like that. You think it's a bare minimum because you do it with everybody. I gave an example of like opening the door, but that might be a little bit more of a Southern thing. So I'm going to try and give an example of something might be seen in romantic relationships. Okay. So anxious individuals, they may ask you, like a reciprocal conversation. So let's say somebody says, how are you? Or no, that's still probably more of a Southern thing. Like let's say in a romantic relationship, somebody's, I don't know, says, how was your day at work, right? Let's say an anxious person says, how was your day? The avoidant individual says, fine, but they don't always reciprocate it, right? But let's say some of them do because they're following more closely connected to you. Anxious individuals do that even with a stranger. Let's say a stranger says, how was your day? The anxious individual says, it was good. How was your day? How was work? That's common, right? Avoidant folks don't do that as much. And so them doing that with you, that seems like the bare minimum. But for them, they're opening up. They're asking you how your day was. Not because they don't care, because they don't really think about people's days in general. When you ask them, sometimes they're taken aback, right? Because they don't think about how their day was. And so they don't recognize this is important to ask somebody else, right? That's just something to think about, okay? Different perception. The next one is different values, okay? Avoidants tend to value peace and harmony much more prominently than anxious or even fearful leaning anxious prefer. Because those folks actually prefer progress, okay? Instead of emotional depth. They perceive it as emotional depth. Avoidants do not perceive it as emotional depth. Sorry. So anxious and fearful leaning anxious think progress is emotional depth and connection. And that could even mean conflict, resolving conflict, not fighting and yelling all the time. Anxious and fearful, a lot of people get that misconception wrong, that fearful and anxious like fighting for just no reason. That is not true. I have learned that they like the progression that comes out of the argument, right? And that's actually a good thing. That's not unhealthy at all, as long as there's progress, right? They feel like that's emotional depth. Avoidant individuals feel like peace and harmony is emotional depth because it feels consistent. And I've mentioned this in like almost all my videos, right? Peace and harmony, if you give that to an avoidant, especially a dismissive avoidant, they will probably never leave you. That's what they value. They love that. They avoid relationships, a lot of them, because they think it's going to be a headache, it's going to be challenging, it's going to be too much, it's going to take too much time. But if it's peaceful and harmony, they're like, oh yeah, this is great. I'll keep this forever. Truly. It's probably hard to explain and understand if somebody's not avoidant, but it truly is that. And I hope that y'all can understand that because it's very genuine from avoidance, okay? The next one is core value versus feelings, okay? So this is something that is important to recognize if you feel like you are receiving the bare minimum and this is just not something that you can handle, okay? I would like to suggest and at least highlight that it's important to prioritize the alignment and core values rather than the superficial or prominent feelings that may not always be there during the hard times or longer into the relationship, okay? Mutual respect and support are much more vital than that emotional feeling when you're longing for them or the memories you guys had when you were first dating, okay? The core values, the respect, the fact that your partner is there for you or you're there for your partner. Sometimes it's important to prioritize that when you're thinking about the bare minimum. I had some patients who were mentioning like they want their partner to get them um, like a bouquet of flowers, or they want to do something really special for 4th of July and kind of make it a more romantic setting since both of their families are not in town and they just want to make it like a special type of barbecue date type thing. Just everybody's different, right? They were trying to make something out of the 4th of July, make it romantic. Great. I think that's awesome, right? That's coming up when I'm making this video. And they wanted it very romantic, like when they first started dating. The avoidant individual is saying, yeah, I want to do 4th of July, but I want it to be more like relaxed, more calm, like we're just barbecuing, we're cooking, then we're cuddling on the sofa and just watching TV. They want it more like family oriented, right? Where the anxious individual wanted it more romantic, taking pictures, putting it on social media, whatever it is. And these two differences, sometimes it's because the anxious individual might prioritize those expressive feelings, which isn't bad. It's both are good. But sometimes it's important to recognize if you're leaning too much where you want that all the time, it might be possible that avoidant individuals are just not your speed, because avoidants just tend to not operate like that. It's not who they are as a person any longer due to the neglect they've had, but it's likely that that's going to stay even if they heal. It might change, but it's probably not going to change so much. And so it's going to be a give and take. It's going to be compromise on both ends. And that's just something to prepare for, okay? The next one is, and I think this is the last one I'm going to mention in this video, but I think it's very important, okay? It's very important to be aware if you're falling for your partner's potential rather than who they truly are, okay? And I'm sure this is highlighted in probably every video on YouTube. I don't talk about this too much, but I do think it's important, okay? When you see your partner for who they could be instead of who they are, you are hurting yourself and your partner, okay? Who they are can still be the micro changes that you're seeing. That's still who they are. Who they potentially are going to become based on who they're showing you they want to be, that's different. Maybe you're seeing them change and they're making progress. So you do expect that one day you guys will get married. That is okay because you're seeing that. But if you're not seeing anything, but you're just hoping something will happen, that's very different. So being aware of the changes you already see is very important. It's vital to understanding who your partners become. Now, if you don't see anything, maybe it's something to recognize, are you accepting the bare minimum or not? Because the bare minimum, as we have clarified in this video, and I'll make more videos about it, is a perception. But your perception matters, okay? So if you're feeling like you're not getting enough and there's no progress, the relationship might need to be adjusted some shape or form, meaning you might even have to leave. You may have to talk to your partner about it, whatever it may be, but it's really important to recognize, okay? I apologize if I was a little all over the place. I'm really tired. I probably look really chopped. I probably shouldn't say that. I do feel tired. I've had a really busy day and it's a really busy week. This time in summer, I'm just working and there's a lot of research opportunities. So bear with me. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one, okay?